It's the very beginning of morning, not quite 6 o'clock. Darkness still holds the world outside. Somewhere within these walls, others sleep on. You may have just stirred, fingers already reaching for your phone's glow. Or perhaps coffee sits warming between your hands. A routine morning, a familiar pattern, your normal world. Now shift your mind somewhere else entirely. Imagine yourself waking not in this place, not in this moment, but 60,000 years into the past. Your eyes open inside a cave where France exists today. There are no walls, no ceiling in any way you'd understand one, only rock looming above and fire reduced to smoldering embers as the long night ends. 8 other people sleep nearby, pressed close together, sharing warmth, their bodies forming a living shelter against the cold. Beyond this cave lies something utterly foreign. Complete darkness, bitter cold. A world stripped of everything that makes your existence possible. No buildings, no roads, no markets. Only forest, a river's flow, wild things, and an open sky. You are Neanderthal. One day stretches ahead. Today, something unusual unfolds. We won't simply discuss ancient humans as abstract textbook figures. Instead, we'll walk through this day together, 1 hour following another, from first light to darkness, using real evidence. Excavation finds, bone and tooth analysis, scratch marks on stone tools, ancient fire sites, chemical fingerprints preserved in remains, skeletal records. Dozens of sources that let scientists rebuild not just what these beings were, but the exact patterns of their daily existence. This isn't imagination. This is reconstruction, and it touches truth more closely than you might believe. But first, one observation sets everything that follows. Back in 2012, field researcher Eric Trinkhaus and his team examined skeletons from several European sites where Neanderthals lived. They discovered something striking. Almost every adult skeleton bore marks of old injuries. Broken bones that had fused and healed. Damaged limbs that had mended. Crushed skull bones that had grown back together. These numbers tell more than simple hunting accident statistics. They are proof. Wounded individuals had been maintained. Others fed them while they couldn't hunt. The injured didn't perish abandoned and alone. Someone cared for them. Real, active care for those unable to tend themselves. This knowledge anchors everything that comes next. 5:47 in the morning. Sunrise hasn't quite arrived, but the eastern sky slowly brightens, not like a switch flipping, but gradual, like someone very carefully raising the lights incrementally. Within the cave, shadows still dominate. Coals glow faintly, radiating weak warmth and a scent, resinous, woody, faintly smoky. This aroma reaches the waking mind first. It arrives before sound, before light itself. Fire means survival. Fire means safety. Our Neanderthal, let's call him an adult male around 35 winters old, already old by his era's measure, doesn't wake from an alarm or the sun. Cold brings him to consciousness. Outside, the night temperature dropped to freezing or below. Late autumn holds the land, approximately 48,000 years before now, a period between 2 major ice ages when Europe experiences moderate chill. Heat from the fire has retreated during the darkness. The body, curled on its side atop furs and hide, registers this loss. He rises without haste,
slowly, with effort. An old shoulder wound troubles his right side, a hunting injury from years back, and mornings bring ache. Everyone who's lived with persistent pain knows this. The body wakes gradually, lagging behind the mind. His first act, the fire. Not by custom, not for ceremony, but pure necessity. Without flames, there's only cold. Without light, the cave becomes absolute darkness. Without heat, water can't warm and food won't cook properly. He gathers a few slim branches stacked near the entrance, saved since yesterday, completely dry. He arranges them carefully atop the coals. He breathes gently several times, cupping his hand to keep the warmth concentrated. The red deepens in the embers. The twigs ignite. Fire returns. This morning ritual, rekindling overnight coals, is performed daily for decades. Thousands of repetitions, as automatic as your coffee maker, though the stakes differ significantly. If the coals completely die, producing new fire demands friction methods or flint and pyrite, processes requiring hours, strength, and persistence. Regarding flint, actually, archaeological digs at Neanderthal locations show they didn't simply use fire, they mastered its management. Several sites have revealed something remarkable. Evidence that embers traveled between locations inside protective containers. Birch bark or shells held the glowing remains. This needs comprehension. Fire becomes transportable. It's a process controllable, movable, reproducible.
This is abstract thinking made practical. As flames strengthen, others stir awake. Beside our male rests a female of similar age. 2 teenagers, perhaps 12 to 14 winters old. 3 younger children, 2 elders, a man and a woman who, judging by their worn teeth and bone condition, have seen 50 years or past. By Neanderthal standards, these represent extreme old age. Their very survival speaks volumes. They were fed, they were protected, help came when needed. Without constant physical demands and zero medicine, few reached 50 winters. The group is modest. Genetic studies indicate standard Neanderthal family bands numbered somewhere between 10 and 30 members. Small numbers mean both weakness and strength. Weakness, any person lost, diminishes everyone. A single sickness or hunting failure impacts the whole group immediately. Strength, small bands move swiftly, adapt readily, shift territories without requiring massive resource stores for survival. Mourning means eating. More precisely, consuming yesterday's remainder. The previous day's unconsumed meat stayed outside the cave entrance where it's cooler, naturally slowing decay. Unplanned food preservation from their perspective, just practical understanding. Cooler location keeps meat longer. They warm the meat directly over coals, across nearby stones, or skewered on sticks. Tests of tartar deposits from multiple Neanderthal sites reveal heat-treated food residue. They regularly boiled and roasted, not only ate raw meals. Throughout this meal, mostly quiet descends, typical of hungry people in early daylight hours. Meanwhile, beyond the cave, the forest becomes visible. Dense, dark woods, bare autumn trunks, fallen leaves carpeting the earth. Somewhere distant, a bird cries out. Closer, a branch snaps somewhere. Our Neanderthal lifts his head, pauses, listens without moving for several seconds, then returns to eating. Wrong branch, wrong animal. This constant background consciousness defines existence in a world without walls or fences. Part of the mind continuously monitors, perpetually gauges, danger or safety,
familiar or strange, threat or resource. This isn't modern anxiety. It's simply how a brain functions when evolution shaped it in environments where complete relaxation meant early death. After eating arrives a brief period we might label warning discussion, though no formal counsel exists.
It's simply the moment when several adults gather at the fire and trade sounds, gestures, glances, exchanging information. Where yesterday's animal signs pointed, which direction for today's hunt, who stays protecting children and the old ones, who travels to the river for water. We don't know precisely what Neanderthal language sounded like. The hyoid, that small throat bone involved in speech, sits in their skeletons nearly identical to ours. This indirectly suggests they could physically create complicated sounds. Whether they possessed genuine language, complete with grammar and abstract ideas, or simply a more complex signaling system remains mysterious. Probably something in between. Sophisticated enough for coordinating hunts and passing survival information, perhaps not elaborate enough or structured differently to spin the rich stories modern humans tell. Yet consider that dawn scene differently. 9 beings who just woke in a frigid cave. They rekindled fire. They ate. Now they organize their day through almost no words, through intimate knowledge of one another, through years of togetherness, through understanding that needs no explanation. It's not drastically unlike how you coordinate this morning with housemates, who takes kids to school, who stops at the store, except without phones, and with game animals instead of supermarkets. An hour past sunrise, the gathering dissolves. 3 adults, our male and 2 companions, depart for the hunt. This portion of the day determines everything following. Hunting isn't cinema drama, no sting, no shouting, no climactic strike to music. Hunting means walking, extensive walking. Gradual, watchful, meticulous movement through forest where each sound carries significance and every step requires calculation. The 3 leave the cave toward the wooded slopes. They understand this forest like you know your neighborhood. Every path, every ravine, every oak grove where deer prefer grazing. Spots where aurochs roam, river crossings for wading. Knowledge accumulated across years, passed from experienced hunters to young ones, sharpened and revised with each season. They travel silently, nearly wordlessly. Communication happens through gestures. Raised hand, stop. Finger pointed sideways, that direction. Open palm downward, slowly. These signals aren't yesterday's invention. They're refined to automatic precision because vocal noise during a hunt is a gift to prey. After roughly 40 minutes of walking, they reach a clearing where a river meadow unfolds. Grass shows matting in several spots, animal bedding areas. Hoofprints mark the muddy bank. Fresh prints. Our Neanderthal lowers himself onto one knee, examines the impression, tests the air for scent. Wind comes from the north. They're moving against it, so quarry won't catch their smell. Excellent. Track reading is a discipline all its own, one Neanderthals perfected. From track shape and depth, an experienced hunter determines creature type, approximate body mass, travel direction, speed, and how recently it passed, not through intuition or magic, but accumulated practical knowledge transferred across generations through observation and experience. They progress along the river, staying in tree shadow. Within 20 minutes, they locate the animals. 7 deer, 3 females, 4 males of varying ages, grazing the stream bank, periodically lifting heads to listen carefully. Now begins the complex portion. Not the physical challenge, but the tactical problem. Archaeological studies show Neanderthals primarily hunted large game, horses, aurochs, reindeer herds, woolly rhinoceros, occasionally mammoths. This wasn't random preference. One large animal provides abundant meat, substantial fat, rich marrow, and useful hide. A successful hunt could feed the whole group for several days. Yet large game presents serious danger. A ton-weight aurochs or enraged rhino kills a hunter with one strike. This danger explains their method. They didn't hunt alone, didn't attack chaotically. Scientists have reconstructed their strategy from bone arrangements at dig sites and damage patterns on those remains. The method is straightforward and efficient. The drive. They steered an animal or small group toward natural obstacles, cliffs, marshes, dense thickets, river bends. Once it lost freedom to maneuver, they delivered their strike. Our three males separate now. Two circle around the herd's flanks, slowly, with controlled movements, using trees as concealment. The third remains behind. He'll create noise when the moment arrives. The goal, not the entire group, but one specific deer. A young male standing apart from the rest, positioned right at the bank's edge where the river curves and the ground becomes steep and slippery. Not accidental targeting. They've made a deliberate choice. Youth means tenderness, but he's already large enough to yield meat in quantity. Proximity to water restricts escape paths. Distance from the herd means others won't sense danger immediately. This is planning. This is reading circumstances. This is target selection, role assignment, and real-time coordination without words. Anyone who still imagines that Neanderthals were purely instinctive creatures operating like mere animals has never attempted to orchestrate a drive hunt targeting a large deer through dense woodland. The hunters wait for an extended period, sometimes 20 minutes, perhaps 30, completely motionless, enduring the cold, maintaining postures that begin to cramp after 10 minutes. This waiting is integral to the hunt. Patience, the capacity to remain still, silent, breath-controlled, allowing no sound or movement while the prey positions itself where needed. Then comes the signal. One of the flanking hunters tosses a stone toward the herd, not at the animals themselves, just a noise. The deer startle. Movement begins. The young stag at the water's edge bolts instinctively along the shore, toward the narrowing bank, the steep drop. Exactly there. Everything that follows happens rapidly, extraordinarily rapidly. Neanderthals were not distance hunters. They possessed no bows and arrows. That technology came later, linked with anatomically modern humans. Their primary weapon was a heavy wooden spear, either with a stone tip or without, designed not for throwing from distance, but for close combat. Extremely close, several meters at most, sometimes nearer still. This meant the final phase demanded approaching a cornered, terrified, powerfully built animal and delivering a thrust at point-blank range. The skeletal trauma evidence confirms this. Neanderthals show frequent fractures in the upper body, shoulders, arms, ribs, clavicles, a damage pattern identical to rodeo riders and professional wrestlers, those engaging regularly in direct physical contact with large animals. They understood this risk. They accepted it each time, because no alternative existed for feeding their group. The spear strikes. The deer doesn't fall immediately, never immediately. It thrashes, attempts to rise. Its legs strike the ground and everything nearby. One hunter receives a glancing hoof blow to the thigh, not a break, but a serious bruise that will ache for days. A second thrust ends it. Silence follows. Then the heavy breathing of 3 hunters standing over their kill. Butchering begins instantly. There's no time to waste. Blood attracts predators. Each of the 3 carries stone tools, small, sharp flakes of flint that cut better than many modern knives. Analysis of cut marks on bone from Neanderthal sites reveals the butchering sequence with remarkable precision. First, the hide is removed, then the limbs separated, then the carcass is split and the organs extracted. The liver and heart are consumed raw on the spot immediately, not from savagery, but practical necessity. These are the most nutrient-dense parts, rich in iron and vitamins, and they spoil fastest. Bones aren't discarded. They're carefully fractured with a specialized stone, a hammerstone, to access the marrow inside. Bone marrow is concentrated fat, highly caloric, which in a cold climate with unpredictable food access held enormous value. A single large femur contains several hundred calories. When the body expends enormous energy on walking, hunting, and thermoregulation, this is substantial. Butchering requires about an hour. Then the meat must be transported to the shelter. It's wrapped in the hide, creating a crude sack, and carried across the shoulders. The return journey weighs heavier than the departure. The deer weighed around 150 kilograms, the meat after processing roughly 70 to 80, divided among 3, so approximately 25 kilograms each, plus weapons, plus exhaustion from the hunt, and that hoof strike to the thigh. The walk back carries no triumph, no cries of joy, only walking. Heavy, silent walking through a forest already darkening as November daylight shortens. They must reach shelter before darkness falls. In this fatigued, meat-laden trek through the autumn woods, there exists something I want you to recognize. Not admiration, not pity, not superiority. Simply acknowledgement. This person is tired. His shoulder aches, an old injury, and now his thigh throbs from the impact. He carries a heavy burden. He thinks of children waiting at home and understands that the food he carries serves not his personal victory, but his entire group's survival. He walks toward home. This is profoundly human feeling, recognition in that. Because what follows upon their return astonishes researchers more than anything else. Not the hunt, not mere survival, but what transpires once the hunters return home. They arrive at the shelter around midday or slightly after. The sun has already crested its zenith, shadows now falling the opposite direction. While they were in the forest, the shelter wasn't idle. This matters to understand immediately. In a world without commerce or infrastructure, every day is a working day. Every individual physically capable contributes something useful. This isn't exploitation or coercion, it's simply survival logic. Groups where everyone works endure. Groups where half remain idle perish when winter comes. The woman who woke beside our hunter that morning spent the first half of the day working with flint. This represents what's called flint industry. Among Neanderthal skills, few are more undervalued. Manufacturing quality stone tools isn't simply grabbing one rock and striking it with another. It's a technological process demanding understanding of material properties, multi-step planning, and refined motor control. Creating a typical Mousterian scraper, the primary Neanderthal tool, first requires proper core preparation, then a series of precise strikes to detach a blank of the desired shape, then carefully edging the blade with fine retouches to achieve proper sharpness. Experimental studies where modern people attempted to reproduce Mousterian technology from scratch revealed that grasping basics takes several months of practice, while achieving competency comparable to Neanderthal specimens requires years. This isn't primitive craftsmanship. It's a skill requiring instruction. Nearby sat a teenager, one of two who slept in the shelter. Perhaps 13 years old, he watched and learned. He observed how the woman positioned the stone, the angle of strikes, how she selected impact points. Sometimes she handed him a flake and gestured, "Try this."
His attempts were rougher. She took his hand and demonstrated the angle. This is instruction, knowledge passing from elder to younger, what anthropologists call social learning, and it distinguishes humans from most other creatures. Another teenager, a girl about the same age, occupied herself with different work. She was cleaning and stretching a hide from the previous hunt. Hide preparation, another underestimated Neanderthal skill. For a skin to become soft and serviceable as clothing or bedding, it must be cleaned of meat and fat residue, softened through mechanical processing, repeated stretching and working, and treated. Neanderthals employed detached scrapers for this, tools featuring one dulled edge for hide work.
They appear at sites in enormous quantities, indicating that hide processing was a regular, important activity. Why did they need processed hides? The answer is obvious: clothing. Without it in a European winter with below-zero temperatures, survival is impossible, regardless of robust Neanderthal physiology. Though direct evidence of Neanderthal clothing doesn't exist, organic material doesn't preserve tens of thousands of years, the circumstantial evidence is compelling. Specialized hide-working tools, wear patterns on those tools, skeletal adaptations to cold, geographic habitation in frigid latitudes. Neanderthals wore clothing. This hasn't been seriously debated in the scientific community for decades. An elderly man, well over 50, sat by the fire doing something that might initially appear to be idleness. He held a wooden stick and carefully scraped bark from it using a small stone flake. This wasn't idleness. This was crafting a spear shaft. A quality spear isn't merely a pointed stick. It's straight, well-balanced, sufficiently light yet durable. Selecting proper wood matters. Surface preparation matters. Balance matters. A poorly balanced spear on a hunt means a miss. A miss on a hunt means hunger. Hunger means the entire group weakens. He worked without haste. He had the entire day and 50 years of hunting experience guiding every scraper movement. Children, 3 of them, roughly 4 to 8 years old, ran about the shelter area within several dozen meters, doing what children do across all ages: playing, tossing pebbles into puddles, constructing things from branches, fighting over an interesting stick, one having discovered a large feather and now racing about, clearly delighted by the find. This detail matters. Neanderthal children played. This isn't romanticizing. This is analysis derived from sites where miniature versions of adult tools appear, clearly too small and too crude for actual use. Children's crafts. Attempts mimicking adult behavior without practical purpose, simply because it intrigued them. Play for children isn't rest. It's learning through imitation. Evolutionarily, this ranks among the most effective knowledge transfer methods. Children observe, copy, experiment, and gradually, through informal learning, acquire adult skills. It works in chimpanzees, it works in modern humans, and apparently, it worked in Neanderthals. When the hunters returned with meat, the shelter livened noticeably. Quietly, without fuss, but noticeably. Children ran to look. The elderly man set down his spear and stood to help unload. The woman put aside her flint. Meat was arranged on flat stones near the fire. Some would be consumed today, some preserved. Neanderthal meat storage methods are understood through indirect evidence. Bone marks indicate meat was sometimes stripped from bones and stored separately, allowing the group to carry food when relocating. Certain bones were deliberately fractured and arranged in particular patterns, possibly primitive marrow reserves for periods when fresh meat wasn't available. Everyone prepared the meal together. Again, this detail is significant. Food among Neanderthals wasn't an individual matter.
Meat from the hunt was distributed among all group members, including elders, children, and those unable to hunt for various reasons. Isotope analysis from same-site burials confirms this. The nutritional status among different group members was roughly equivalent, indicating relatively equal food distribution. Equal food distribution within a group isn't natural, it's a social norm, an agreement, even if unspoken and wordless, still an agreement. Those who hunted today received the same portion as those who remained at the shelter. This exists because tomorrow a hunter might be injured and remain behind while others bring food and share. This is reciprocity. It represents one of the fundamental social structures underlying any human society, from primitive bands to modern states. You help me now because I'll help you later. Neanderthals grasped this, not in terms of social contract language, certainly, but through lived experience of surviving together. During the meal, something occurred that seems trivial but actually reveals much. An elderly woman, beyond 50, struggled chewing the meat. Her teeth were worn nearly to the gums, several missing. Many aged Neanderthals had teeth in such condition. They'd used them as a third hand, clamping hides and straps during processing. Decades of such work simply wore the enamel away. A younger woman sitting beside her, without speaking, took a piece of meat and held it over the fire longer until it softened, then returned it. The elderly woman accepted without words. This isn't a scene from a film.
This is a reconstruction built on actual evidence, the condition of ancient teeth combined with proof of cooked food and straightforward logic about what happens when people share space long enough to anticipate each other's needs without speaking. It's care. Quiet, unremarkable, utterly everyday care. Not heroism or sacrifice. Just this. I notice you're struggling, so I do a little more to make things easier. 60,000 years ago. But the day isn't over yet. And what comes after lunch in this cave will surprise you more than anything we've discussed until now. By early afternoon, something shifts in the cave. Not sleep, though some may have dozed by the fire, but rather a slowing down. The meal is eaten, the morning's urgent tasks are done, and suddenly people have something rare and precious in prehistoric life. Free time. That question, what did Neanderthals do with it, split the scientific community for decades. One side insisted Neanderthals had almost no free time. Life was survival, hunting, sleep. The other side pointed to things they'd found that didn't fit the pure survival story at all. Consider these artifacts. In a cave in Spain, they discovered shells stained with red and yellow pigment, hematite and lepidocrocite mixtures. 115,000 years old. These shells had holes. You could thread something through them. Jewelry. Made by Neanderthals 65,000 years before anatomically modern humans reached Europe. On the wall of another Spanish cave, a red disc painted in ochre. Around 65,000 years old. Only Neanderthals again. No one else was there. In several German caves, they found eagle claws and feathers showing intentional removal, not torn off accidentally, but deliberately taken. Why? Not for food. Eagle meat is tough and tasteless. For ornamentation. Claws with drilled holes turned up in a Croatian cave, 130,000 years old. All of this says Neanderthals thought about how they looked. They had something like aesthetics, an idea of beautiful and desirable that had nothing to do with staying alive. And this brings us to the afternoon hours in our cave. The hunter sits by the fire. His shoulder hurts less now. The warmth helps. His hip, where the hoof struck, still aches, but it's bearable. In his hands is a piece of red ochre, a mineral they found a week ago in exposed rock by the river and carried back. He carefully drags it across a flat stone, creating red powder. Then he mixes it with a little fat left over from butchering the deer. What he does with this mixture we can only guess. Maybe he spreads it on his skin. Ochre traces on Neanderthal bones are interpreted by some as evidence of body painting. Maybe he marks objects, tools, hides, walls, caves. Maybe it's part of a ritual we'll never understand. But that he does it at all means something. Ochre isn't food. Collecting ochre, storing it, processing it, these take time and effort with no immediate practical benefit. That means his world contains things that matter for reasons other than survival, symbolic reasons, social reasons, ritual reasons, abstract thinking. For a long time, people thought only we were capable of that. Nearby, a young woman is occupied with her own task. She holds several eagle feathers, black with brilliant blue shimmer. She's weaving them into something, a leather cord or a bundle of hair, impossible to say. Her movements are precise, concentrated. Clearly, she's done this before. They're practiced. A child approaches and reaches for the feathers. She gently guides his hand away, not harshly, not annoyed, just, no, not now. He leaves disappointed, moves to the other side of the fire. Within a minute, he's forgotten, playing with a stone. An older man has set aside his spear. It's ready. Tomorrow it goes to work. He sits and looks at the fire, just looks at it. This is studied, by the way. People of every culture and era gaze into flames. Anthropologists call it fire trance. Fire in darkness creates a state of relaxed focus where the brain generates alpha waves, like meditation. This isn't metaphor, it's neurobiology. If a Neanderthal brain was similar enough to ours, and it was, then fire affected it the same way. What does he think, watching those flames? We'll never know. But that he thinks, that something is there behind that gaze, seems obvious. A brain this large, this complex, can't be empty. Now something happens in the afternoon that deserves separate attention. Not because it's dramatic, quite the opposite. It's quiet and almost invisible. But this quiet event tells us more about Neanderthals than any hunt or ornament. Among them is a man around 40. We mentioned him briefly, one of the hunters. He has an old injury. His shin was broken badly years ago, and it healed with a limp. But look at how it healed, perfectly aligned. If no one had set it correctly, the bone would have mended crooked and he wouldn't walk at all. Someone knew how to immobilize a broken bone. Someone kept him still while it healed. Someone fed him during those weeks or months when he couldn't hunt himself. Now this man sits off to the side, working with a bundle of plants, sorting them, setting some aside, crushing bits in his fingers. This isn't speculation. In a Denisovan burial, researchers found pollen from several plant species, yarrow, groundsel, and others that traditional medicine across cultures uses as anti-inflammatory and pain-killing. Arguments still rage about whether these were intentionally placed flowers or just pollen carried by rodents. But other evidence points the same direction. The dental calculus of several Neanderthals contained traces of bitter plants that weren't food. Poplar, with its salicin, a natural aspirin relative, and other species with recognized analgesic properties. This doesn't mean Neanderthals understood pharmacology. It means they watched. When a sick person eats this plant, they feel better, and they passed that observation on. Primitive medicine, but medicine. After an afternoon with ochre and feathers and plants, the atmosphere in the cave changes. Outside, November darkness comes early. By 4, the sun sits low. By 5, it's dark. The sky beyond the mouth becomes black. Night birds start calling. Somewhere far off, barely audible, a howl. A wolf? Distances are hard to judge in a night forest. The group drifts closer to the fire without being told. It just happens. The darkness outside and the flames inside create a natural boundary, and everyone instinctively ends up on the right side of it. Here, gathering by firelight in the dark, evening begins. But before we stay with this fire to the end, we'll do something unexpected. We'll shift. Not forward in time, not along a map in the usual sense, but to a parallel world existing at exactly the same moment as our French cave, the same day, those same 60,000 years ago, only several thousand kilometers east. The Altai. What's called Siberia today, Russia, the Altai Mountains on the border with Mongolia and Kazakhstan. Here, in a system of limestone caves above the Anuyi River, lives a different group. Small, maybe 8 or 10 people. They're not Neanderthals. They're Denisovans. We don't know what they looked like. We don't have skulls intact enough to reconstruct them fully. We have some teeth, noticeably larger than ours and larger than Neanderthal teeth. A fragment of skull bone. That single child's finger bone. And DNA, detailed, clearly read, telling much except appearance. From indirect evidence, tooth size, certain genetic markers, Denisovans were probably larger than Neanderthals, more massive, with broader faces. But this is reconstruction with considerable uncertainty. Call them simply the others. Notably different, yet close enough that if one encountered a Neanderthal or modern human by chance, reproduction could occur, which, in fact, it did. Their morning unfolded differently than the French cave morning. Not because they're fundamentally different beings, but because place changes everything. Climate differs, conditions differ. The Altai at this time isn't an ice desert, but it's not soft European autumn either. It's extreme continental climate, harsh winters, brief burning summers, rapid temperature drops in fall, early snow. This morning, thin snow already lies on the ground. Not yet deep winter snow, but snow. Temperature around -5 Celsius. The Denisova cave, the very one Russian archaeologists will discover in 60,000 years, sits strategically. High above the river, sheltered from wind, good view of the valley, excellent position. You see who moves through the valley from here. No floods, it stays dry. The group woke earlier than in France. In mountains, dawn breaks differently, sharper. Fire here matters more than in the west. Temperature runs 10 degrees colder, and without constant flame, cold seeps into the cave fast. Their day differs from the French cave in one major way. They're not leaving to hunt with spears, or at least not only that, not only large game. Analysis of bones from Denisovan layers shows a different food strategy than European Neanderthals employed. Yes, large animals appear there. Bones of woolly rhinoceros, cave lion, bison, but alongside them, bird bones, fish bones, small rodent bones, mollusks. A wider, more varied diet. No accident. Adaptation to territory where big game is less predictable and less available than in Europe's rich forests. 2 from the group head to the river, fishing, though fetching water too. Stone Age fishing isn't rod and float. It's either a fire-hardened stick, bone maybe, used to spear fish in shallows, or a primitive stone weir directing fish to one spot. Traces of such weirs turn up at multiple sites from this period in Asia, alongside such enormous accumulations of fish bone that spearing them one at a time makes no sense. 3 stayed in the cave with the children and elderly. One young man, teeth suggest about 20, goes alone into the hills. Strategy 2. While part of the group works collectively by the river, one scout surveys territory, looks for animal signs, checks snares if they have them. Snares themselves are their own story. We have no direct evidence Neanderthals or Denisovans used traps. Wood and cordage don't survive, but indirect evidence exists. Quantities of small animal bones at sites, difficult to explain through casual hunting, and specific patterns, same species, same seasons, same proportions. This looks systematic, not random finds. Those who stayed occupied themselves with what the French cave group did, but with one crucial difference. Denisova Cave sits at the crossing of several natural routes, river valleys leading south toward what's now Mongolia and west toward the Kazakh steppes. Different groups passed through or stayed here periodically, from different populations maybe, with different skills, different resources. This geographic detail reveals one of the most remarkable aspects of Denisovan history. Artifacts discovered in Denisovan cave layers originate from materials absent in the Altai region itself. Seashells that could only have arrived from distant coastlines, hundreds of kilometers away. Stone types whose sources lie several hundred kilometers to the south. This indicates either that Denisovans themselves undertook extensive journeys, or, equally plausible, that some form of exchange existed between groups. Items passed from community to community through actual chains before reaching this mountain cavern in the Altai. Exchange. Commerce, using the term carefully without modern connotations. Transfer of resources between unrelated groups. This demands something crucial: the capacity to establish relationships beyond one's immediate circle. Trust extended to strangers. The concept that one can negotiate with unfamiliar people rather than merely fear or attack them. This marks the inception of what we call social networks. Not Facebook, naturally, but the underlying logic remains identical. I know someone who dwells by the sea, and through this chain of acquaintance, a sea creature ends up in a mountain cavity. Back to the river. Fishing proved successful, yielding sufficient catch for everyone in the group, with surplus remaining. Extra fish represents not luxury, but security. Given the approaching Siberian winter, announced by initial snowfall, each additional morsel of food functions as a small insurance against hunger. Fish requires different preparation than meat, not over open flame. It burns rapidly on the outside, losing most nutrients. Instead, stones heated in the fire, then removed and placed in a pit, a primitive yet effective roasting method. Fish cooked on stones retains more fat and protein than meat charred directly over flame. How do we know this? From the thermal alteration patterns visible in fish bones found in dwelling layers. Chemical analysis distinguishes bones exposed to open fire from those exposed to moderate temperature. Details invisible to the naked eye become apparent through mass spectrometry. After the meal in the Denisovan shelter, a similar scene unfolds as in the French cave. The fire, quiet conversation or silence, children near the flames. But one element appeared absent from our French scene, or perhaps was simply not described. One adult, seated by the fire, produces rhythmic sounds, not words, but rhythm. Similar to what we call drumming, except without a drum. He strikes one stone against another, evenly, steadily, with subtle variations. The children freeze and watch. An elderly woman begins swaying in time. This is not a proven fact specifically about Denisovans, but it represents a proven fact about humans generally. Rhythmic perception, The ability to sense and reproduce regular rhythm constitutes a uniquely human trait absent in other primates. Chimpanzees and gorillas cannot synchronize with external rhythm. They do not keep time. Humans do this instinctively. If Denisovans were sufficiently close to us, and genetics confirms they were, they likewise perceived rhythm. Rhythm precedes music. Music precedes language in its emotional dimension, and language in its emotional aspect enables a group to synchronize not merely physically but psychologically, to experience themselves as unified. Around the fire in the Denisovan cave 60,000 years ago, 8 or 10 beings sit listening to the rhythm, some swaying. Children begin clapping their hands, not precisely, somewhat offbeat, but attempting to match the tempo. This scene appears today in any location worldwide, in any culture, in any era, on any continent. Humans by a fire and rhythm. Here, in this moment, the French cave and the Altai cave converge. Neanderthals and Denisovans meet. Not physically, thousands of kilometers separate them, but in this single, simple action, humans by fire, rhythm, children clapping out of sync, they do the identical thing. Because this is human, not ours or theirs, simply human. This brings us to the final portion of this day, to what transpires when the fire dims, children sleep, and that time arrives which we have never properly named arrives. Not sleep, not wakefulness, but something between. A time of darkness and flame, when the boundary between past and present grows exceptionally thin. We return to France, our cave. Darkness outside has become absolute. November night in prehistoric Europe, without a single artificial light source for thousands of kilometers around. Darkness almost unknown to modern humans, neither city darkness with lamp glow seeping past curtains, nor country darkness with trees silhouetted against starry sky. Real, dense, almost tangible darkness, where a hand before one's face becomes invisible. Only the fire remains. Flame in this darkness represents far more than heat and light. It marks the boundary between safe and dangerous, between us and them, between life and death. Everything within the circle belongs to us. Everything beyond remains unknown. The children already sleep. They were placed closer to the cave wall, away from the entrance, wrapped in hides. Children sleep quickly, as all children sleep in any epoch who have spent their day in movement and fresh air. Without devices, without evening light disrupting circadian rhythm, their bodies recognize darkness and respond appropriately. Within 20 minutes of settling them, they slumber. The adults do not yet. This is that time, evening by the fire before sleep. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner, in her 2018 study, termed this the evolutionary incubator of sociality. Her team examined contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, peoples whose lifestyle most closely resembles that of our ancestors, and discovered a striking pattern. Daytime conversations in such societies concern themselves almost exclusively with practical matters. Where does hunting occur? Who accomplished what? Who experiences pain? Where were tracks observed? Survival pragmatics. Evening conversations by the fire in darkness after eating differ entirely. Stories emerge. Not instructions, not plans, but narratives. Of times long past, of people no longer present, of creatures someone witnessed or heard of worlds beyond known territory. This constitutes narrative thinking. The capacity to create and transmit narratives, one of humanity's defining characteristics, distinguishing us from other primates. And apparently, this trait is not exclusive to anatomically modern humans. In our cave this evening, something comparable unfolds. The elderly man, he who crafted the spear, speaks quietly, unhurriedly, occasionally gesturing. The other adults listen. What precisely does he say? We shall never know. But something he communicates. And that something matters to the others. Otherwise they would not attend. Perhaps a tale of hunting from long ago. Perhaps a warning about something. Perhaps what we would label a memory, or something of someone no longer among them. Someone who passed, whom they buried. Here we must address death, because how Neanderthals approached death represents perhaps the most significant thing we know about them, and the most human. Throughout Europe and the Near East, in caves across France, Iran, Iraq, Israel, and Croatia, intentional Neanderthal burials have been discovered. Not merely bones in earth, but actual burials, bodies arranged in particular positions, frequently curled, fetal-like, as though laid to sleep. Bodies oriented in specific directions. Pits clearly excavated deliberately. Sometimes objects lie nearby. This results from neither accident nor rockfall. It represents deliberate action. Someone expended time and effort. Digging holes in rocky soil without metal tools constitutes strenuous labor, undertaken to position a kinsperson's body in particular fashion. Why? We cannot say with certainty. To protect the body from scavengers, possibly. Aesthetic motivations, possibly. Ritual reasons, quite likely. For the very decision to bury the deceased rather than abandon the body and depart already indicates something beyond pragmatism. That death registers as an event requiring response, as something significant. Conceivably, someone from this group perished several months prior. Perhaps this occupies the elderly man's thoughts now. Perhaps this explains why several people by the fire gaze not at him, but at the flames. With that particular expression that means one thing across every language on earth: grief. We cannot verify this specific event, yet we know Neanderthals mourned their lost. This truth is literally written in stone, in the form of intentional burial sites. Had the dead merely meant nothing, they would not have been preserved. They were preserved, therefore they possessed meaning. There existed memory of them, existed sorrow, existed methods for processing that sorrow. The fire grows low. Adults settle down to sleep one by one. Our hunter lies on his side on a bedding of furs beside the woman. His shoulder barely troubles him now. Mornings bring the worst pain. By evening he has adapted. His hip aches with a dull, habitual throb. He hears the breathing of sleeping children, the crackling of the dying fire, a distant nocturnal bird call. Moments before sleep overtakes him, he does what all humans do before rest. He listens. All remains well. Children breathe. Fire persists. Outside only wind. Sleep can come. One day has concluded. 60,000 years ago, in a cave on the territory of present-day France, a Neanderthal with an injured shoulder and bruised hip closed his eyes and slept. Tomorrow he would wake and begin anew. He would kindle the fire, venture to hunt, gather. He would care for those alongside him, would gaze at the flames. This day repeated thousands of times throughout his life, and throughout his father's, his grandfather's, his great-grandfather's. Hundreds of thousands of years, one day following another. in caves across Europe and Western Asia. Then we arrived, and here commences the most crucial portion of this entire account. Not because it concerns them, but because it concerns us. All that we witnessed today, mourning in the cave, the hunt, butchering the kill, a child with a feather, the woman who softened meat for an elder with poor teeth, the man with a healed fracture, the elder by the fire telling stories we cannot hear. Everything existed 60,000 years ago, before our writing, before our cities, before our religions, governments, technologies, and yet it remains recognizable, painfully recognizable, because we do the same every day. We wake and immediately verify all is secure: children, fire, safety. Though our fire now bears the name central heating, and safety gets verified through news feeds. We depart to obtain food, not with spear, yet the logic endures. Resources must be procured, brought home, distributed. We tend to those beside us. We soften meat for grandmother with failing teeth. We sit at a sick person's bedside, never abandoning the wounded. We adorn ourselves, not with eagle feathers, yet we adorn nonetheless. We regard the fire, now termed watching screens, but the neurology proves identical. Alpha waves remain unchanged. We recount narratives by our symbolic fire, now called podcasts, television series, YouTube videos. We inter our deceased. We grieve. We remember. The gap between that Neanderthal in the cave and you right now spans 60,000 years. It sounds like an abyss, yet in evolutionary timescale, it amounts to almost nothing. Less than 1% of life's tenure on Earth, merely thousands of generations, each transmitting to the next not only genetics, but methodologies of being human. To care, to remember, to narrate, to preserve. We did not become different creatures. We became the same creatures with different implements. And this carries simultaneous solace and responsibility. Solace, because everything appearing uniquely modern to us, our attachments, our sorrow, our capacity for care, our narratives, our aesthetic sense, none of this represents civilization's invention. It is not a thin cultural veneer across animal nature. These constitute deeply rooted human characteristics present with us far before writing, before cities, before anything we customarily recognize as markers of humanity. We didn't become human through civilization. We were always human. Neanderthals were human. Denisovans were human. Different, perhaps, but human all the same. This carries responsibility. This means something. Because if humanity stretches back this far, if it runs this deep in what we are, then what happens when we lose it? When we turn away from the injured? When we refuse food to the old? When we abandon those who cannot fend for themselves? This isn't a step backward into animal nature. It's worse. It's the loss of what kept us alive, what let us survive for 60,000 years, what made our existence possible. There was a Neanderthal. His shoulder was injured. Each morning he lit the fire for everyone in his group. He didn't think about it in those terms. He simply did what people do, what had always been done, what gets done. And that's the answer. The answer to the question that's haunted science for 150 years. Ever since Johann Carl Fulhot found that first Neanderthal skull in the Neander Valley. Who were they? They were us, just earlier in time.